My name is Nishad. I'm a software engineer in New York, and you can find me on the internet at thathijabe. So today, I'm actually going to be talking to you guys about 3 different things: the Bengali genocide, how to visualize data with D3.js, and why engineering with empathy is really important. So you're probably thinking, none of those things seem at all connected in any way. And also, how is she going to do all that in 30 minutes? Well, don't worry. I'm going to break it down into 4 parts. So first, I'm going to go through what I built, how I built it, why I built it, and then was it even worth it in the end? Which is always an important question when engineering or coding. So I'm a Bengali American. I was born in Bangladesh, and then I immigrated here. And growing up, my father would always tell my brother and I stories of the Bengali independence war that he both lived through and survived. So for me, the war was always something that was very much living. And as someone who was very much technically inclined, I've always wanted to make it a bit more concrete. I really wanted to grasp the whole genocide and the resulting diaspora. So for me, that meant taking a look at the numbers. So this is a world map displaying the Bengali migration in 5-year intervals starting with 1995. This is my 6-month-old baby. Say hi. It didn't take me 6 months to create, so don't jump to any conclusions. D3.js is not that hard at all, and you'll soon find out it's actually pretty simple to put up a map like this. It's just that if I were to do the same thing with, say, the US and tracking US expat communities over the past decades, it would be a lot easier because the US for the past few centuries or so has been in a position of power, and they've been able to collect data about their population. It turns out that a post-war developing country like Bangladesh doesn't exactly have that luxury, nor are they that meticulous about keeping count. So this was me 6 months ago, starting this project, and naively believing that if I simply typed in the words Bangladesh migration statistics, our overlord and ruler, Google, would present me with the stats. This was sadly not the case, even though I kept on believing all the way to the 2nd page of my Google search. I mean, has anyone ever gone to the 2nd page? Well, I did, because, yeah. And after going through multiple searches and going through almost all the pages, some of these searches, I finally came up with solo data sets from the government websites of Canada, the US, India, and the UK. But even these data sets were really sad. They only tracked which Bengalis had been granted citizenship in their respective countries since 1985. So this data pool is so sad and so small. And it made 0 sense to me, and I'm not biased at all. I know I said I was Bengali American, but this is kind of crazy. Like, there's 200 to 300 million of us, and in the past 18 years alone, since 2000, 32 million of us have migrated out of Bangladesh and established citizenship in other countries. So I'm pretty sure that's not how science works. Like, you can't just make 32 million of us, like, just disappear like that. So I went down the rabbit hole, and eventually I came across a really obscure UN data set. And the UN, right, the United Nations, obviously collects a lot of information about various countries and various movements in the world. So logically, you would think that they would have an API, right? So they do, but it's a third-party API. And not only that, but they don't even have everything. They just have like the basics that you could just Google and find on your own anyway. So of course, I found the API, but my data set, or rather my data set was not on the API. So I downloaded an Excel sheet from the UN site. Does anyone want to guess how many lines was in that Excel sheet? It was in the upwards of the thousands. And so I was like, okay, I've already committed to this for this long. Might as well go all the way. So, I sat there and I formatted the Excel sheet. I cleaned up the data, I sanitized it, and then I saved it as a CSV. For my project, there was no data that needed to be loaded in real time or be updated rather in real time. So a CSV was the most easy and fastest way to get my D3.js project up and running. I actually cried while doing this, so that's actually me, not Drake. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with D3, it's actually a JavaScript library that is used to create graphics and maps and other visuals. And as a quick rundown of D3 and how it can be really good at its job is that it helps you attach your data to DOM elements, and you can go and make it really pretty and sparkly by manipulating those elements with SVG or like HTML, CSS, etc. And here are some examples. Aren't they all pretty? So I first got into D3 a little over a year ago when I decided to use it for an internship that I had. And my project was basically to build a dashboard to observe high-volume metrics. So any tech company worth their salt already has something like this. And so really what my project was to make the metrics quickly readable and understandable. And pretty, I guess. So most people become overwhelmed when you present them with something like this, but if all of that information was nicely wrapped up and presented in, say, a graphic or an animation, it's much more easier to consume and process. And that's usually what tends to draw people to D3. There are a lot of libraries out there, but D3 tends to be the one that can really help you with multi-layered projects. So, for example, my map, not only is it tracking time, but it's also tracking populations and locations, and as well as some other socioeconomic data points. So, when I first started with D3, this is kind of what it looked like. And this tweet was literally done a year ago on this very day, which I think is weird. But yeah, a year ago, I didn't know what I was doing with D3.js, but the community that is around D3 is really excellent. There's a lot of help out there, and the documentation is pretty good, especially for someone who doesn't typically work in JavaScript. So eventually, by the end of my internship, I was able to develop something a bit more like this. And so there's hope for you too if you're struggling. And in fact, this year I was also able to conquer chord diagrams and figure out matrices and stuff like that. And this is actually displaying the differences between male and female people male and female migrants in Bangladesh. So let's take a look at the code. So this is the code behind the maps in particular. So this is what the JavaScript file looks like. On the left-hand side are just the variables that have been declared, and then on the right-hand side is the function for populating the map in GeoJSON. That's what that looks like. You don't have to write this on your own. Please grab it from the internet somewhere. And this is basically what it's doing is it's just displaying the world map and making sure that all the longitude and latitude points are readable. And then this is what my CSV file looks like. It's pretty basic. I just have the year, so the CSV is on the left side. So I just have the year, the location, the latitude, longitude, and then the number of people that migrated within that year from that country, from Bangladesh to the country. And then on the right-hand side is the function that essentially displays that essentially filters and displays the populations over time. So as you can see, location, latitude, longitude, the number of people are all processed there. So now it's time for existential crisis. Why did I even do all of this? So I like to think that there is a lot of fluidity in how we choose to define ourselves. As an immigrant and therefore a de facto member of two completely different worlds, identity has always been kind of a tricky thing for me. I don't really think that terms like Bengali American or female software engineer or even hijabi really make up all of who I am, but they definitely shape the experiences that I have had as a person. So for the better part of my tech journey, I've just been working on learning new languages, new software, and frameworks, and I've been building apps kind of just to show that I'm competent enough to build apps. And I've basically just been following this cookie cutter outline of what to do when you're first entering the tech field. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with doing that and just learning the ropes. But what drew me to programming was how much impact you can have by trying to solve a problem with something that you yourself created. So one of my New Year's resolutions this year was to start creating with purpose, which is way harder than you think. All of a sudden, I had to start asking all of these vaguely existential crisis-esque questions like, why am I doing this? Is this meaningful? Why am I forcing myself to use Vim? What is my purpose? Yeah. So in conclusion, like, what is my purpose? That was my whole crisis. So does all this even matter, really, in the long term? And you yourself might be wondering, well, is this project even meaningful? Why care about creating a map and analyzing the socioeconomics of immigration from a small South Asian country, especially as people who probably don't have a father that lived through the war or aunts that were murdered? It can be hard to care about something that's not exactly impacted your own life. But let's talk a little bit about diaspora. So, according to Merriam-Webster, diaspora is a movement or migration or scattering of people away from an established ancestral motherland. So this term, it has a solid definition, but a lot of times for a lot of people, it can have also a feeling and an emotion. It's usually a term that's used to convey the fact that you yourself have chosen to migrate perhaps, but that you've lost your cultural identity within your new country. And although my family didn't immigrate immediately after the war, I still consider myself a child of diaspora. So why, again, to answer the question why I did this, well, I wanted to create a tool for education and empathy. And more importantly, I wanted to help enact change. While searching for immigration stats online, as you could tell, I had an incredibly hard time just trying to find statistics. So I reached out to some family back home, and some of my family works in the government, and even for them, it was hard to do. So I dug a little deeper, and for the greater half of the 6 months, I started researching how government grants were done in Bangladesh and like exactly what the process was needed to receive grants and stuff. So I started noticing patterns in the way that data was collected and how more often than not, especially in the 90s, women were neglected because they did not have as much buying power as men who were immigrating in and out of Bangladesh. So because women haven't been tracked as closely, that can be harmful in the long run, as there's no data to back up on like why they would need certain government grants. So the real answer to why I did this was that I really wanted to make my father's memories of war concrete with some hard numbers. And so this cliched quote, with great power comes great responsibility, I do think that oftentimes people in tech do have a savior complex, but along with that, it feels as though more often than not, engineers create for the sake of creating rather than stepping back and thinking about impact and the consequences that their creations can have. So this tends to lead to products and tools that lack empathy and only have short-term solutions. A good example of that would be Bodega. That was a startup that tried to basically replace bodegas in New York, And it was basically a vending machine. And if the founders had literally taken like a step back and looked at exactly what they had created, they would realize that. But they were trying to solve an issue that they had rather than one that the community had. And so with that, I leave you with this quote. It's really important to think out what you're creating and how it will have the impact on the community that you're based in. Thank you.